And I would like first to thank everybody because I was enthusiastic, actually. I mean, there's so much of information which passed by. It's so important to communicate also all what has been said here, all the success stories, all the practices, and even the recipes. I understand that we also had recipes to manage the egos by having a good glass of red wine. So this one, my own ego would completely agree with that one. And finally, if we think about it and trying to relating to my experience of Rio Plus 20, what you are doing here and all of us is building the institutions for sustainable development. Actually, this is exactly one of the topics. How do you create institutions for sustainable development? And it's very interesting to see how this actually creation of social capital takes time, is difficult, and is disconnected from the usual time of companies or politicians. It's not the same, it's longer, and it has to accommodate all these different times. So I also take the impression that people want to be good. I mean, people defend interests, groups defend interests, but in the whole, everybody wants to be good and help if they can. So the idea is always in these negotiations to try to pull out the best part of each of us and of each our people to try and put it in front and put it to work. And the two qualities I see now in all these on all this work. First is the story of the ox and the butterfly. You can divide the people into the ox and the butterfly. The ox, you know, he goes straight, he traces his path for when he goes plowing directly and doesn't be diverted. Very important, you get to your goal. But the butterfly, if you don't have a butterfly, you are in trouble, because the butterfly goes from one flower to another and brings fecundation from sector to another. So you need both types of people. This means, if you want, that you are trying to implement the holistic view of sustainable development, trying to link the water to all the other issues. We had lots of examples of that. And for instance, in cities, I was always been impressed that the people in charge of energy don't talk to the people in charge of water. But of course, not only you need water for energy, but you need energy for water. You have to pump, you have to clean. I mean, all this is very complicated, and you have to put everybody together. So we had at least lots of discussion about that with agriculture, with poverty, etc. And it brings us to these international negotiations where you have also the silo and the convention, and each one comes with plans. So you have the low carbon plans, you have the poverty reduction plans, you have the water plans, you have the... How can we integrate that and have real sustainable development plans which take everything into account and not get lost in each of these silos? So this is something very, very important. And the second thing I would like to stress is, how can we get each of our citizens, of our partners, to be citizens of the world? This is something so difficult to try to get into people's mind and heart. Usually, you know, when I am in a harsh winter, people come and say, oh, look at this global warming stuff. It's been so cold. It's never been so cold. And they don't even see or understand that in Australia, there's forest fires every day. So the idea of trying to be the citizen of the world, to understand that, well, you also being the citizen of your own country, is something very, very difficult, which brings us to out of the box. Out of the box. How can we, you know, you have to stay in line with what's happening. We've heard that. You have to build on what is happening, but you also have to be able to get out of the box. So what I take of this is water cooperation exists. I've met it today and yesterday. Fantastic. So water cooperation exists. People have to know that. And what I understand is it not only does it exist, but it's unescapable. It's unescapable. We had lots of people expressing that we are passing from 7 to 8 billion, and the amount of water is always the same. And you know, how much do you have fresh water? It's the James Bond syndrome, you know, it's 0.007% of the water is fresh water available. So 0.007, so you must remember that, it's easy. And besides, you have climate change, and of course, climate change is going to transform the rainfall patterns. And you have to get all these cooperation systems at all levels. I have retained the all levels, and you have to choose the right level if you want to, when you go somewhere and you want to do something. All levels means also planetary, because we've got the conventions, we've got the Ramsar Convention, we didn't talk about that one, which is useful also to protect the rivers and the ecosystems. But for instance, look at the mountains. We had the Mount Kenya. Mountains are water towers. especially because there's lots of snow. And the snow is a real buffer. It authorizes drip by drip in the summer to have always water. If there's no more snow, that means there's going to be much more water in winter and not enough in summer. And what is going to happen in the mountains? Look at already what's happening in Nepal and these countries. There's more and more water coming down because the glaciers are melting, and all the lakes are very dangerous and threatening the communities which live there because the dams are going to break. I mean, not the dams, the rocks, etc. And so perhaps one day we'll have to have an international solidarity with mountains and put little dams everywhere in mountains to keep the water. I don't know. I mean, think of what's going to happen in the next 20 years. Perhaps we'll have to have that sort of international cooperation system also. So a few conclusions what I took. First, the importance of time. Time came very, very often in lots of your presentations. It takes time, first. Takes time. And second, it's for the long term. Think of the long term. It's important also to build trust. And I was very impressed by the fact that, you were waiting on embuscade, we say in French, like, we were waiting for the political window to grab it, or for the accident to grab it also, and to be able to do things after. So that was something which but also that deals are temporary. Things change. You have the timber floating. Well, the timber floating, that was in the I don't know, in 1930, and after it changes, you have something else. But I mean, so you have to be ready to change. Second, it's science-based or information-based. Data is so important. You must know also that, for instance, today, data from Africa, you have less data from Africa than you had 20 years ago. So, I mean, this is something you have to think about that. So data is absolutely important. It's also for capacity building. Capacity building is very important, the information and the way the technology is used now for this information sharing. It must be participatory, sorry, my English is not so good. And this is, of course, everybody insisted on this. And everybody insisted, I noted, even those who don't have a voice today. And, of course, lots of insistence on the empowerment of women who play such an important role in water distribution in Africa, in agriculture, etc. So this, I think, we should get this. You have to set objectives. I mean, if you do this, you have to know why you do this. You have water cooperation for something. And it was told, I mean, for children or for... We know why you have to do it, and so you have goals. And this has to be fair. So, of course, after the participatory process, it becomes fair, but it has to be fair. You have to look at that. You have some things which can help a lot. Political will, it came quite often. And some politics can change everything for the worse or for the best. So you never know. But, I mean, if you can use it, because it makes a difference. If the boss suddenly says something, it helps. The legal framework, it came quite often. If you can have a legal framework, it helps. And if I can say that as a European guy, in all our European countries, if we didn't have the European Union and the Commission proposing laws and directives, we would be so far from where we are now in all our legislation on the environment. You must know that about 80% of our legislation on environment comes from the European Union. And so this is very, very important. So this links also to the federal. There was discussion on federal and local. I mean, I wouldn't dare say to people that Europe is a federation, but it's on the way. It's the only supranational, I would say, mechanism which has existed since the last World War. So it's very, very important. And going to the legal framework, people talked about sanction. We had the Kenya, you're allowed to sue, not to sue. Sanction, do you have rights without duties? Big question, because we've talked a lot about rights. We didn't talk about duties. And just to say, for instance, if it's right for sanitation, I've been a mayor for 13 years of a little seaside resort. And some very rich people, they build houses on an island. And after they say, I have a right to sanitation. I'm sorry, you're going to pay it for yourself. We're not going to pay for you. So, I mean, the situations can be very different from one place to another. And this question, we have to think about it probably a little more. But we need to have accountability. And for instance, partnerships. We talked about partnerships. We don't exactly know what it means, partnerships. We had the Johannesburg meeting. That was in 2002. Lots of partnerships. 10 years after, where are they? What's happening? Can we have some sort of accountability? What's the result? So perhaps a convention on partnership. What does it mean? What do you need? What are the duties of each of the partners? So things like that. You start as a pilot. You start experimental, and after you sort of think we need this, we need that. And 7, money helps. money helps. There was a discussion on money. So Josefina said, it's not always very important. Some others said it helps a lot. Okay, so, you know, there was different ways of seeing the question of money. And Josefina, you are very keen on saying that you need a structure. When you have a structure to sort of a backbone also to help on these cooperation systems, well, it helps a lot. You can call it a secretariat, you can call it a committee, but all this is very important. And everything was different. Of course, each of the examples and the cases was different, but it was interesting to see. For instance, someone said, you need to have champions. If you have a champion in the group, it's very useful. And you said you had a noyau, a core of people which in Zaragoza was going to help you. Also, there was the question of the scope of the agreement, which was interesting with one of the examples between countries, where they said the broader the agreement, the scope, the more actors you can bring inside. But the counterpart is it's more expensive because you have to have more focal points, etc., etc. So you have to have a sort of a compromise between the number of actors you want to bring inside of the agreement and the efficiency of the agreement and the cost of the number of resources you need. And of course, in the end, it was very interesting. The World Bank said that go doable, don't go completely desirable. And it was also the idea of the wicked problems where you can always improve, but you can never get to the whole beautiful thing in your head you would love to have. Okay, so that's important. I just wanted to say that we did not. There is other models. You have other models. You know, it's coming from the Oasis. It's an interesting model. You have the market-based Californian system where you can exchange quotas and things like that of water. So there's different other models, but you know, great. It's great that you have a lot. I think probably another day we should also see the economic model. How does it? Because lots of these pilot projects were also financed with donors help, which is a normal when you start, and it goes up to the subsidy problem, etc. But how is it sustained economically after, even perhaps if you take into account the economic cost of environmental services, for instance. So perhaps you have models, economic models, which are sustainable, but perhaps we should learn about it. I was a consultant a certain amount of time ago, and we had a sort of a rule which was non-written, which is never ask people to pay more than 2% of the income they have on water. So, you know, depending on the income of people, it must never be over 2%, otherwise you have the revolution. So we have sad examples of revolutions in the presentation. So perhaps it was more than 2%. So this is something which we probably have to look. Okay, we didn't talk about national water policies either, which is probably also one form of doing things together. How do we get these national policies? And there was two drivers, very interesting. One is technology. And technology, yes, it is a game changer, wherever you want it or not. I mean, it's not enough alone, but it's very important. Look at what's happening, because technology for water goes with technology for IT, it goes together. Look in India, you have these IT centers where the peasant knows the prices in the markets, he has the forecast of the weather, he has the banking services, and etc. So it's very useful. And you've got now the revolution of the meter. Everywhere we are metering the water. Aha, what does that mean? Are you going to pay how much? I mean, but it's so important to know exactly how much water goes there, and it goes to the water accountant system or the footprint we need. And for instance, we talked a lot about the drip irrigation. I read somewhere that in Mexico there was a guy who has invented sort of plastic, and the plastic expands with the water and keeps the water for 7 months. So the plant goes directly to the like a sponge, and for 7 months can get into the water. So you know, there's lots of new things which are happening, and the question is how do we do? Look at the zai. You know, everybody, does somebody know what the zai is? You know what the zai is. Okay, so that's the traditional farming system in Sahel, and one of the ways they do it, you know, the little holes, and they put compost and so on. They put stones to keep in the shade of the stone a bit of humidity, and they do that on the lines, the contour lines. But it's not so easy to find the contour lines. And now you have the satellite, which can help them put the stones. So the satellite and the stones, I think it's a fantastic, you know, joining the very old technology with the very modern technology. So of course it's very important, and I would insist on reusing water. We are opening the era of reusing water, recycling water. This is going to be so important. Most of the cities, look at all the vegetable gardens around the cities of Africa or Afghanistan, whatever, it's completely dirty water. I mean, you must be very careful. And so we need to recycle and to find the affordable technologies for that. And you know, there's a reflection on all this, on sanitation. Sanitation has been lagging. Sanitation is not only the toilet, it's recycling the water and giving it back to nature, or to the human beings which are downstream. So this is absolutely capital. We must make a lot of efforts on that. I could talk about hours on that. And I would give the example of Singapore, because Zaragoza is a good example, but Singapore is science fiction on water. They recycle completely the water. It's a very, very impressive policy in Singapore. Okay, and technology was one, society was the other, and lots of insistence on society. Of course, you have to, technology has to match the social structure, how does it go, the values and things like that. Lots of examples of that were given. Of course, technicians, you know, there was the knowledge, the technician knowledge, and the indigenous people way of doing things, and tradition and culture. Of course, you have to match all that. And people have to change. Both have to change. And the indigenous people are not always right, 100%. Oh, come on, you have to involve. You know, everybody has to make an effort. That's negotiation. And I would also give an example, because as a mayor, it's very useful to be a mayor, you know. I was a mayor after having been a minister, and I had to implement my own laws. I was very, Jesus Christ, what did he decide? It was too complicated. But I mean, the truth is, we created in my little village a super sewage power plant, wastewater, blah, 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 with a super antimicrobian tertiary treatment and all this. So we doubled the piping, one for the rainwater, one for the drain, not to mix up the drain and the water. It'd be very expensive. But in the end, that was not what was important. What was important was to see each house, to see if the pipes were plugged in where they needed to do. So, because you can do the most beautiful technology, but if the pipes are not plugged in, it's absolutely news. And the problem was, how can a mayor go inside of each house? I'm not allowed to go inside of each house. It's private property. So you have to find a way to have everybody to agree to look at all the systems, to the plumbers, do not mix up the pipe for the rain or the pipe for the drain, terrible. But this shows how, you know, it's not what you learn. You don't learn that. You talk about beautiful technician things, and after you have to deal with the real people and the way it is. Okay, so it was very, very fantastic. So in the end, please, be creative, be pragmatic, but overall, keep your ideal and be persistent. Thank you so much.
Well, then we are going to begin. This is a side event to discuss. The title exactly is the pros and cons of developed aquifers, hydrological, economic, social, and ethical issues. It's preparatory meeting for an international research project. So this is a preparatory meeting for that. Then the people do receive with the organization of here Zaragoza an agenda. We have to include a new person in the agenda. This Dr. Sat Altokais comes from Saudi Arabia. All of you know that is a very interesting country for this. Then, in principle, estaba 5 minutes to make the presentation of the people who are here. Well, I think really the mind or the brain of this meeting is Emilio, que está aquí, but Emilio has been with a flu the last years. He asked me to act more in this meeting. Then I think the presentation of the people that here is, well, to my left is Professor Custodio, all of you know him. Then let us go, Jorge, introduce yourself very quickly.
Okay, my name is Jorge Molinero and I work in a consultant company. Okay, my name is Jorge Molinero. I work in a consultancy company named Amphos21. We work internationally and especially in water and environmental issues worldwide. So this intensively developed aquifers is one of the things we used to work with.
Good evening. My name is José Luis García Arostegui. I'm working in Geological Survey of Spain. that depend of the Ministry of Economy and Competitiveness.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Ali At-Tukhays. I am mainly geologist, then hydrogeologist. I worked for the Ministry of Agriculture and Water in Saudi Arabia and with the Ministry of Water when these two ministries were separated. The last position, I was a Deputy Minister for Water Affairs. 4 years ago, I have been moved from the Ministry of Water to Shura Council, which is equivalent to the Saudi Parliament, also dealing with water within the Parliament itself.
Then, would you like to present yourself to the people?
Musa Al-Gahtani from Saudi Arabia, from Agriculture Development Fund. I have a master's degree from economic agriculture. That's it.
Yeah, I'm Jose Albiac from Zaragoza, from a research center. I'm economist and I work on water management, mainly related to agriculture, non-point pollution and things like that.
I am Maite Aldaya. I work part-time for the Water Observatory and part-time for the United Nations Environment Programme.
My name is Juan Antonio López Geta. I'm working in geological surveys of Spain.
Okay. No, that's everybody has already. That's it. No, then we begin with the first presentation. This is my presentation. It will be maximum 10 minutes, even less. When I 5 minutes, you tell me and I finish. Well, then puedo poner la primera. Hablo desde allí o hablo desde aquí.
Porque si no lo tiras.
A ver si damos con la primera.
Eso está. Se está abriendo aquí. Se está abriendo ya. Pero lleva su tiempo.
Lástima que no podemos con tan poco tiempo.
Sí. Y esto aquí. Ya está.
Okay, very quickly. Well, this is the table of contents. Thank you very much. This is the table of contents. And then the origin of this. The aim of this presentation is to remember this is something that was written by the General Secretary of the International Association. Groundwater is still out of sight, but less out of mind. So water is becoming something important now for the global water policy. And then I took this, 14 years ago, there was in Paris a UNESCO conference called Water a Looming Crisis, always looming, always this pessimistic approach. And then I remember I spoke in that meeting. This was afterwards was written in a book by Marc de Villiers. I see during more than 10 years, that was 12 or 14 years ago, I have tried without success to find reliable information on medium-sized aquifers, more than 500 square kilometers, where intensive use of groundwater development has been an economic and or social disaster. In the book by Marc de Villiers, the response, there were 200 people there, was stone silence. So nobody was telling that I was wrong. And then 14 years later, the situation, I would say, is the same. So that this is why we are trying to promote this. Then another anecdote that is quickly, it's already 8 years ago, there was a conference in Jordan And well, some people in the question and answer, I told I am not enthusiastic on the California water resources policy. The farmers' lobby is so powerful as the National Rifle Association that again this year with Obama is again in the newspapers. And someone from the other side, they are the same, and everybody laughed. Well, this is the origin of then in the audience was the editor of the American Society of Civil Engineers Journal and asked me to write an editorial. It was a long editorial that was published years ago. And this is a graph that I have no time to explain, that has been reproduced in many papers, explaining the what we call the 5 stages about the groundwater development, intensive development, that is a recent situation all over the world. There is no time to explain that, but this paper has been reproduced in many cases. Then the 5 stages I distinguished was hydroschizophrenia, so it's the separation between surface and groundwater. Then the groundwater silent revolution, that is a fact. And then the formation of powerful farmers' lobbies asking for surface water transfer. This is a typical case of California. In Spain was because of the formation also powerful conservation lobbies in Spain was cut, and this was not a total transfer. And then there is a lot of social and political confrontations. That is a question that is still alive in Spain in many places. Well, very quickly, this is to remember what is the cause of this silent revolution and the technology, the new technology. And then let us go quickly to what we are trying to do, is to try to finish with a misconception about the groundwater intensive use, or more than, probably is more exact to say, the use of groundwater storage, the intensive use of groundwater storage is probably the key issue to describe it. And then our idea is this, as I mentioned, this is a preparation for a new research project led by Emilio Custodio. I am a helper for him. And this trying to analyze 10, 12 case histories from different countries of the world. And then in each history make to study the hydrological performance, hydrogeological performance. This is the easiest thing. It has been done in many cases. Economic benefits and cost. This has not been done in many cases. Then social changes required for that. And this, for instance, in that case for me was very clear, a paper presented by the professor from Saudi Arabia in a meeting we had 10 years ago, explaining why the intensive use of groundwater in Saudi Arabia, then making an explanation very useful. Environmental externalities, something to take into account, and then political issues, because water is a political issue in every arid and semi-arid country. And then we have to study, in each case, alternative future solution. I can tell also that this is a question that was dealt with in the COMEST. COMEST is the Commission, the World Commission for the Ethics of Science and Technology. And there's a paper about this, about the use of groundwater. And this paper is really, well, this paper is a statement of this International Commission that is very clear about that using the groundwater storage is not always a bad thing. It could be to study in case, but this is going to be the study. The study, what we want to do is to take, as I mentioned previously, 10, 12 case histories going from the Ogallala Aquifer in Texas, to mention a developed country, to Gujarat in India, that is another example, and then we can go to Libya, to New Mexico, to, well, there are almost in every arid and semi-arid country, this is a situation. In Spain, there are many, a good number of examples, Canary Islands, the Crevillente Aquifer, and there is a good number of them, with places where one place is today 400 meters deep. From the beginning, it was at the surface. And I think this is all I wanted to tell. What we are trying to do is to, well, this is to explain about the conclusion is intensive has produced stupendous and social economic benefits in Saudi Arabia, in Texas, in Spain, but has also created some problems, mainly ecological, due to scarce planning and control by the government agencies. The usual current anarchy of groundwater management and governance demands a greater participation of the users, mainly farmers, by means of groundwater users association. Elena Lopez-Gun is working very hard in that. And this is, well, urgent to assess the different types and performance of such associations. I think that's all I wanted to do. And then it's your time, Emilio. You want to come here?
Mr. Chairman, I suggest that since I finish with the proposal, to present first the examples, and then I give the more general view at the end, if you like.
No, but you like.
You are the chairman.
No.
You decide.
No, you decide. Okay. Then what next?
It's up to you.
Well, then Jorge, and you are the final speaker, Emilio.
Okay.
I am going to go to in front to see.
I think it's better.
Okay. So thank you very much to Emilio and Ramon for inviting me to this meeting. As I told you, I am very much interested in this project or research initiative because, well, basically I have been working in hydrogeology for almost 20 years. But during the last years, I am in the private sector, in the consultancy. So we are working worldwide, but especially, well, I mean, not especially, but we are really working in South America and in Africa. And, well, I would concentrate a little bit about the Andean zone and Saharan zone. And I have not real details in this presentation, but if anybody of you want to make a question, I would be happy. It's just a general overview. I have prepared this presentation. I want to be really to the point in the problematic, in one of the problems I have seen, which is not the unique one, probably. Of course, it's not the unique one, but is a common problem in two of the most arid, if not the most arid areas in the world, which are the Saharan zone and this Chilean, Bolivian, Peruvian area nearby Atacama region, but also in the other side of the frontier, especially in Bolivia. And why a company or a consultant company is working in the Saharan and in the Andean region? Basically because we have mining clients, or the contrary, we have clients which are the regulators or the authorities that controls mining industry. So we are working basically in hydrogeological and hydrogeochemical issues related especially with mining, both for water supply or water supply to the mining operation, or for environmental litigations or accidents or whatever. So then I would mix, because the problematic is very much the same. Basically, we have a hyper-arid region, or arid in some places, really, really arid in some others, with a lot of water, a lot of groundwater reserves in general, in both sides. I mean, huge amounts of water. But definitely, when there is a conflict on the water use, the standard ideas or paradigms or sometimes absolute rights that we use in water management would not apply in this context. When we speak about sustainability, water renewal, and things like that, well, this makes no sense, and many, many times it is even completely misleading concept when you really want to make practical solutions in these areas. This is an example that Professor Emilio Custodio knows very well, because it corresponds to a recent project we have done for a client in Chile, and Professor Emilio was an external advisor and reviewer of our work here. And basically this is a picture you can originally in this paper and then also cited in this other one, and this is an example on how to propagate errors a long time when you cite and cite and cite more times and copy and paste some figures. You know, this is a typical cross-section from the from the Pacific coast to the Andes Cordillera. So this is the coastal ridge or Cordillera de la Costa. Here you can have a city like Iquique with 500,000 people living there or something like that that needs, of course, water supply. This is a Pampa del Tamarugal, which is a valley with no rain, zero, absolute zero rain. I mean, no rain at all here. Basically because the front coming to here comes from the other side, which is the Atlantic side, and you have all the rain in the selvatic or in the Amazonian or areas, and then you have some remaining rain here. You can have like 100 millimeters, 200 millimeters of rain over here in the Andes. Then you have all these altiplanic basins, usually endorheic, and then you have here with no rain. And of course, this is a kind of conceptual model of hydrogeology, and well, somebody decided to plot these arrows. And just to plot these arrows has tremendous consequences, because the mining companies are operating here. So there is somebody that must decide if this mining company has the right to extract some water for the process. And then, of course, if you look at this picture, the rational decision would be, no, not at all, because we have people living here, and there is no rain here. So you cannot take the water here. You know, but, of course, there is not real scientific proof of water coming from here to here, and not any scientific proof of the contrary. So then, according to our current understanding, we really believe the issue is more or less like this, that you have basically rain here, and some of the waters circulates here in these areas, and some others here. This is more or less the age of the groundwater according to carbon-14. So it's about 10,000 years of the water here, about half of this age of the water here. I mean, this water age, you know, is a concept that must be taken with care. It's a renewal time or whatever you want to call of the water. Yeah, residence times or whatever. Okay? But, you know, here there is a mining activity, and here you have drinking water supply, and every time more and more agriculture. Because, for instance, in this country, in Chile, usually all the agriculture used to be in the south with a lot of rain, but every time more and more they know that there is groundwater here that you can develop, and the agricultural activity is increasing because the weather here is exceptional. So you can have 2 or 3 crops per year, so, and high value agriculture. So that is the situation right now. And right now there are so low-level conflicts in the papers, I mean, not real conflicts, but of course there is a debate. And you know, in this kind of debate, if you have a mining company here, it is always very easy, because these people, you know, the capitalists, and they win a lot of money, and they are very bad, and blah, blah, blah. So then you have a lot of populistic message in the mass media and blah blah. So it's an interesting case study for this project, I think. On the other hand, we have the Saharan zone, which is hyper-arid or even more than that. In this particular part, which is the boundary between Mauritania, Algeria, and Mali, is almost no rain, maybe one event of rain every 3 or 4 years. And then what you have is that it has been a lot of cooperation activities, NGOs and international aid going on there, and also governments investing there. So basically this is a land with nomad, traditional people living as nomads, but then of course it's very easy to make boreholes. You get water for sure, usually high productivity, a lot of water. Then it's relatively easy to in place a water drinking, modern water supply system. That means that in places that traditionally was nobody living in a permanent basis, now you have like 80,000 people living, 100,000 people living. And of course, you also have agricultural activity. And then they grow tomatoes and some fruits and so on. And they put the camels, and they grow more also animals. So this is also going on right now, and I have seen that at least in this part of the Western Sahara border with Algeria, but also in Niger. Recently I was in this area in Niger. This is a uranium mine in Niger. In this particular area, relatively nearby, there is 3 uranium mines, and it's a 4th coming on. And this is one of the major uranium productions in the world. And in this particular area, 20 years ago, nobody was living. Now there is a city of 100,000 people because the mine activity. There's a lot of people working there, basically everybody, directly or indirectly. And then, of course, to extract the mineral, you need to pump out the water. You need to make the dewatering of that. And you also need the mineral processing. And this consumes some water. Basically, well, this is also just to see how does it looks in the Chilean, go back to Chile. This is the typical endorheic basin in the high Cordillera, and this is the Pampa. This is the place where I tell you there is no rain at all. And then you have occasionally some oases due to groundwater discharges like this. So basically concentrated along the faults or according to the geology. So looking at the at the mining, for instance, is that this is water consumption by the mining industry in Chile. Basically, well, it depends on the mineral and so on, but about 1 cubic meter per ton of mineral process. So an average mine in Chile, mine operation of copper, can have a annual production of about 500,000 tons. If you assume that they will need twice this water because they need more water, not only for the processing, they need more water, this would be like about 1 cubic hectometer per year for every mine. So if you assume 10 millimeters of recharge, I am inventing, but why not? That would mean that you need an area of recharge only for that mine of 100 square kilometers if you apply the traditional concept of sustainability and you start to think in that way. And then people start to debate, is that sustainable? No, it's not sustainable because you are taking more water than the recharge. But, what do you mean? What do you really mean with that? Do you know how much total amount of water you have there? Have you ever compute how many years have you have with recharge without any extraction? It's not the same if you have a wet land associated to that or if not. If you have a wet land, then you have an environmental concern. If not, why do you care if the water is 10 meters or 30 meters? So then, I think there is a lot of things to do in methodologically speaking for management, but also pedagogically. It's also a message that is needed. So just to finish, we have extensive groundwater resources available in arid regions, We have growing population. At least my experience is that all the places I have been visiting in that context, all of them has every time more and more people. Obvious. I mean, this is extreme regions of the world. In natural conditions, nobody wants to live there. I mean, just some nomads or some locals, but very few people. But now, you are improving living conditions. You have internet connection by satellite in the refugees camps of the Western Sahara. Everybody can connect that. You have air condition. So you have improving living conditions, so more and more people is getting there. Increasing agriculture, because there is groundwater. So if you get groundwater and good weather, it's obvious. But in some of these areas, but in many of them I would say, basically because they are remote and nobody has exploited that before, there is a boom of mining activity because the increase a steady increase of the metals price, because there is a huge demand of the emerging economy. So as long as China, India, and Brazil needs to get cables for electricity that they don't have now, you can expect in the next years that this demand would be high, so this would be probably increasing also. And I have seen that you have some low-level conflicts between the different users, especially driven by this mining industry, because they have very bad reputation, probably because they deserve. In the past, they do it very badly in some areas. So, just to finish, a need of water management models or doctrines specific for these areas is obvious, because traditional or even modern water management paradigms, not traditional, I mean, what we call here the new paradigms and so on, I mean, they doesn't apply there. It's not valid. So this is a colleague of mine measuring a piezometer. So I just put this, I like this picture. It has nothing to do with any conflict. This is all tanks of a military camp for training in Chile. But it was nice that they was just in the middle of the piezometer, so they decided to put the piezometer there. It's very well located. And that's it. So thank you. Thank you very much.